They were matinee idols, silver screen legends, and heartthrobs of a bygone era. But behind the glamour and glitz, some of Hollywood's brightest stars harbored a darker, grittier past, one forged in the crucible of war, where they not only served, but took lives. These are their stories. Before he became a Hollywood icon, Audie Murphy was a whirlwind of destruction on the battlefields of World War II. Standing at just 5'5", this Texan defied expectations, becoming the most decorated American combat soldier of the war. His tally? An astounding 241 confirmed kills. Murphy's journey began when he falsified his age to enlist in the army at 17. He quickly proved his mettle, displaying unparalleled bravery in Sicily, Anzio, and southern France. One of his most legendary feats occurred near Holtzwihr, France, where he single-handedly held off a company of German soldiers for an hour. Despite being wounded and running low on ammunition, post-war, Murphy transitioned to Hollywood, starring in over 40 films, including the autobiographical To Hell and Back. Yet, the horrors of war never left him. He battled PTSD, often sleeping with a loaded gun under his pillow. His life, a blend of heroism and haunting memories, ended tragically in a plane crash in 1971. Known for his warm and affable on-screen persona, Jimmy Stewart's real-life heroics during World War II tell a story of remarkable courage, leadership, and determination, qualities that transcended the silver screen. Stewart's journey from Hollywood stardom to the cockpit of a B-24 Liberator bomber was anything but smooth. Yet it cemented his status not only as one of America's most beloved actors, but also as a decorated war hero. At the outset of America's involvement in the war, Stewart was already a household name. With a string of successful films under his belt, he could have easily stayed stateside, entertaining troops and serving as a symbol of patriotic morale. However, Stewart was driven by a sense of duty that went beyond appearances. When he enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1941, it wasn't for a ceremonial role. He wanted to fly. Despite initial resistance from military brass, who saw him as too valuable as a public figure to risk in combat, Stewart relentlessly lobbied for active service. His early days in the military were spent as a flight instructor, training young pilots in the finer points of aerial warfare. Yet Stewart longed to serve on the front lines. He worked tirelessly to prove his competence, mastering complex technical knowledge, sharpening his leadership skills, and ultimately winning the respect of his superiors. His persistence paid off. He was assigned to the 445th Bomb Group in England, and later rose to command the 703rd Bomb Squadron. Stewart's combat record is a testament to both his skill and his nerve. He flew 20 perilous missions over Nazi-occupied Europe, piloting heavy bombers in the face of intense anti-aircraft fire and relentless enemy fighters. These missions were not mere exercises in courage. They were crucial to the Allied war effort, striking at the heart of Germany's industrial capabilities. Stewart's leadership under fire was critical, helping to coordinate complex operations, maintain the morale of his men, and ensure the success of missions that often pushed both aircraft and crews to their limits. For his service, Stewart received numerous honors, including the Distinguished Flying Cross and the French Croix de Guerre. His record stands as a powerful example of the sacrifices made by those who fought in the skies over Europe. Yet Stewart's commitment to duty didn't end with the war's conclusion. He remained in the Air Force Reserve for decades, eventually achieving the rank of Brigadier General, making him the highest-ranking actor in U.S. military history. Jimmy Stewart's dual legacy as both a beloved film star and a decorated war hero remains unparalleled. His story is a reminder that true heroism often occurs far from the public eye, in the quiet, determined service of a cause greater than oneself. Long before he became an icon of gritty, stoic masculinity on the silver screen, Charles Bronson lived a real-life drama that forged the unshakable persona audiences came to know and respect. His wartime service during World War II, as a tail gunner in the U.S. Army Air Forces, was a crucible of danger, hardship, and resilience, qualities that would later define his film career. Born into poverty as the 11th of 15 children in a coal mining family, Bronson knew hardship from an early age. The physical labor of the mines shaped his body, while the constant struggle for survival instilled in him a quiet determination. When war broke out, Bronson enlisted and trained as an aerial gunner, eventually being assigned to a B-29 bomber crew in the Pacific Theater. The tail gunner's position on a bomber was both vital and perilous. Stationed at the rear of the aircraft, Bronson had to remain constantly vigilant, scanning the skies for enemy fighters that often targeted the tail as a point of attack. The role demanded sharp reflexes, a steady hand, and an iron will, qualities Bronson possessed in abundance. Flying 25 combat missions over Japan, he faced the ever-present threat of death with steely resolve. On one particularly harrowing mission, Bronson's bomber was severely damaged by enemy fire, forcing an emergency landing. The experience, like many others, left an indelible mark on him. He was awarded the Purple Heart for wounds sustained during combat, a testament to his courage and sacrifice. Yet Bronson rarely spoke of these experiences publicly. His quiet demeanor off-screen mirrored the stoicism he brought to his roles. He let his actions speak for themselves. Bronson's war experiences shaped not just his life, but also the characters he portrayed in film. The hardened, laconic heroes he embodied, men of few words but decisive action, felt authentic because they were, in a sense, drawn from his own lived reality. He had seen the worst of humanity during the war, and that perspective infused his performances with a rare depth and gravitas. Though he became famous for roles in films like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and the Death Wish series, Bronson never glamorized violence. Instead, his on-screen presence suggested a man who understood its true cost. His characters, like himself, were survivors, men who bore their scars with quiet dignity and refused to be broken by life's hardships. In the end, Charles Bronson's legacy is more than just his filmography. It is the story of a man who faced death in the skies over Japan, who carried the weight of that experience into a celebrated acting career, and who never sought to glorify the violence he had endured. His silence on his wartime experiences was not out of indifference, but perhaps a reflection of a deep understanding that some stories, while integral to one's character, are too personal and too painful to share. David Niven, with his impeccable charm, debonair presence, and trademark pencil-thin mustache, seemed the quintessential English gentleman, more at home in drawing rooms and cocktail parties than in the gritty trenches of war. Yet during World War II, Niven put aside his acting career and returned to the British Army, where he served with distinction in roles that were as daring as they were secretive. Rejoining the army at the outbreak of the war in 1939, Niven was eventually assigned to the Commandos, a newly formed elite unit trained for audacious raids behind enemy lines. Later, he transferred to the Phantom Unit, a specialized reconnaissance group tasked with gathering critical intelligence from the front lines. These missions often placed him in mortal danger as he operated behind enemy lines in Europe, relaying information on German troop movements, artillery positions, and the changing tides of battle. Niven rarely spoke in detail about his wartime exploits, a silence that only fueled the mystique around his service. However, he did acknowledge his participation in the Normandy landings, remarking with characteristic understatement, "I will, however, say that I was with Phantom in Normandy and I was wounded in the leg." This casual admission belied the courage and skill required to survive in such a treacherous theater of war. For his contributions, Niven received the U.S. Legion of Merit and the French Croix de Guerre, two high honors that recognized his valor and effectiveness in the field. When the war ended, Niven returned to acting, carrying with him the quiet gravitas of a man who had seen the world at its most brutal. His performances in films such as A Matter of Life and Death and The Guns of Navarone exuded a subtle authenticity informed by his first-hand experiences of war. Niven's story serves as a reminder that heroism often lies behind a polished smile, and that even the most elegant figures can hide a steely resolve forged in the crucible of conflict. Steve McQueen's reputation as the King of Cool was well earned. On screen, he radiated an effortless confidence, a rugged independence, and an untamed energy that made him a cultural icon. Yet before he became a household name in Hollywood, McQueen served in the U.S. Marine Corps, where his rebellious nature often clashed with military discipline. Enlisting in 1947, McQueen's time in the Marines was marked by frequent trouble. He was demoted 7 times and spent a total of 41 days in the brig for various infractions, including insubordination and going AWOL. His attitude seemed, at times, irreconcilable with the structured world of military life. But it was also in the Marines that McQueen's better qualities, his loyalty, courage, and quick thinking emerged under pressure. During a training exercise in the Arctic, McQueen found himself in a life-or-death situation when a tank he and his unit were operating fell through the ice into the freezing water. Without hesitation, McQueen dove into the frigid depths, rescuing 5 fellow Marines trapped inside. This act of selfless bravery earned him a commendation and a measure of respect that transcended his earlier disciplinary issues. McQueen's military experiences left an indelible mark on him, both personally and professionally. His time in uniform gave him an authenticity that resonated in roles such as Captain Virgil Hiltz in The Great Escape, a character who embodies defiance in the face of adversity. McQueen's own defiant streak, forged in the harsh realities of the Corps, brought a layered realism to his screen persona. His characters weren't just cool because of the lines they delivered. They were cool because they had earned that sense of self-reliance the hard way. As David Niven and Steve McQueen embodied charm and cool, Lee Marvin was the archetype of the stoic, battle-hardened warrior. His deep, gravelly voice, weathered features, and imposing presence made him a natural fit for tough guy roles in films like The Dirty Dozen and Point Blank. Yet Marvin's on-screen toughness wasn't an act. It was rooted in the searing reality of combat. Marvin enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps at the age of 18 and was assigned to the 4th Marine Division, fighting in the brutal Pacific Theater during World War II. He saw action in the Battle of Saipan, one of the bloodiest engagements of the war. There, Marvin's unit was ambushed, and he was hit by machine gun fire, suffering a severed sciatic nerve that left him with lasting pain and a lifelong limp. For his service and sacrifice, he was awarded the Purple Heart. Reflecting on his time in the war, Marvin once stated, "The war was the single most important event in my life." The harrowing experiences of combat not only shaped his worldview, but also informed the grizzled, no-nonsense demeanor he brought to his characters. His roles often carried an undercurrent of fatalism and hard-earned wisdom, portraying men who understood the cost of violence because they had lived it. While these stars returned home as heroes, the psychological scars of combat often lingered. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, was a silent affliction, with many suffering in silence due to the stigma surrounding mental health. Audie Murphy, for instance, battled nightmares and insomnia, often seeking solace in sleeping pills. Steve McQueen's rebellious nature was, in part, a manifestation of unresolved trauma. These struggles highlight the complex aftermath of war, even for those who seemed invincible on screen. Imagine the thunderous roar of B-17 bombers slicing through the clouds, the tense stillness as a sniper holds his breath before the shot, the metallic clatter of tank treads grinding through European fields, and the eerie silence in the moments between gunfire on foreign shores. These were the real-life scenes experienced by the stars we so often admire for their on-screen heroics. David Niven, cool under pressure, quietly relaying enemy positions behind enemy lines in Normandy. Steve McQueen, stripped of his rebel image, plunging into icy waters to save his comrades, his breath ragged, adrenaline surging. Lee Marvin, blood seeping through his uniform, teeth clenched against the agony of a severed nerve on Saipan's beaches, staring down the chaos with grim determination. These moments, far from the crafted sets of Hollywood, were battles fought not for applause, but for survival, duty, and honor. When the cameras rolled and the scripts called for courage, resilience, and sacrifice, these men knew the weight of those words, not because they had read them in a script, but because they had lived them. So the next time we watch Niven's wry smile, McQueen's steely gaze, or Marvin's world-weary snarl, let's remember the man behind the performance. Let's honor the lives they led off-screen, the missions flown, the battles fought, and the friends lost in faraway lands. Because for these Hollywood legends, their truest performances weren't captured on film, but forged in the fires of war.